One, two, three. Today we're going to talk about the coastal ocean, basically the coast of Virginia and North Carolina. Barrier beaches and islands lie offshore from about 10% of the world's coast, and they're particularly Pause. One, two, three. Barrier beaches and islands lie offshore from about 10% of the world's coasts, and they're particularly important off of the United States Atlantic and Gulf coasts. Barrier islands are elongated islands of unconsolidated sediments, usually sand, and they trend parallel to the shore. They're found along the coast with gently sloping coastal plains and a moderate tidal range. Barrier islands are generally backed by estuaries and wetlands, which may range in size from narrow lagoons to extensive sounds over 27 miles wide. Barrier islands are cut by one or more tidal inlets. Here in the United States, barrier islands are found from North Carolina down the Atlantic coast, around the Gulf of Mexico to Texas. There are no true barrier islands on the Pacific coast. However, there are barrier beaches. Barrier islands are not static structures. They're extremely dynamic systems that are constantly changing and moving. Wave, wind, and tidal energies are the primary factors that shape and regulate a barrier island ecosystem. For barrier islands to form, you need a large supply of sand to build the island with moderate wave energy to shape the island. A number of ideas have been suggested to explain barrier island formation. The most widely accepted is the mainland beach detachment hypothesis. In stage 1, approximately 15,000 years ago, when sea level was 85 meters below the present beach, ridges Pause. 1, 2, 3. A number of ideas have been suggested to explain barrier island formation. The most widely accepted is the mainland beach detachment hypothesis. In stage 1, approximately 15,000 years ago, when the sea level was 85 meters below the present, beach ridges developed along the lake shoreline, which was much further out along the continental shelf. In stage 2, rising sea level at the end of the Pleistocene resulted in the breaching of the beach ridge and flooding of the region behind it. The beach ridge becomes a barrier island backed by a bay or lagoon. And in stage 3, the barrier system migrates landward across the shelf and sea level continues to rise. Passes and inlets in barrier islands also migrate. Longshore currents move sand from the upflow side of the pass and deposit it downflow. Barrier beaches are often home to extensive development. These developments are often destroyed as the result of natural processes. This first beach is North Topsail Beach before and after Hurricane Florence, 9/11/2018. You'll notice that it cliffed off, the erosion was so bad. And the second is Surf City during the same time period. At this point, they lost route, the North Shore Drive that goes through Currituck and down through the Outer Banks. You can usually see a successional change in plant communities on a barrier island. The foredune will have sea oats and railroad vine, very small plants. The dune crest, which is much higher in the air and less likely to be flooded by seawater, will have things like sea grapes and saw palmettos. The back dune, which is protected by the dunes, will have things like cabbage palms and prickly pear cactus. Then the ecosystem most likely to develop in Virginia and North Carolina is the live oak hammock in the oak forest area. And then the shore or bay shoreline, we'll have things like black mangroves and red mangroves. Often we'll see cedar in that area too. So Outer Banks wildlife. The wild horses of the Outer Banks, known as banker ponies, are the most famous residents of the islands. These horses are believed to be descendants of Spanish horses that swam ashore after shipwrecks hundreds of years ago. Banker ponies are protected and they have the run of the place. You are most likely to see them on the Corolla beaches and in Ocracoke, but they have been seen elsewhere, even as far north as Back Bay. Wild boars are common to the barrier islands because they're good swimmers. Outer Banks wild boar are big and have long tusks and bad attitudes. You probably won't see them in town or on the beach, but if you're exploring rural areas of Corolla, you may spot one rooting around for a meal. They're skittish, so watch from a distance and let them go their way. They are also found in the Back Bay area. So if you're wondering why Outer Bank bunnies are so massive, it's because they're not bunnies. They're actually hares. Hares are much bigger than rabbits with long legs and ears. They are common on Roanoke Island, where you may see dozens upon dozens at twilight. Many folks driving into the Outer Banks are surprised to see a black bear standing alongside or crossing the road. Black bears are frequently seen on the islands, especially in Currituck and around the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. Black bears don't have a reputation for being aggressive, but they are bears. So best steer clear, give them space, and don't feed them. We called them bear dogs in Knott's Island, and they do swim. Once thought to be virtually extinct, red wolves have made a comeback in recent years. You can spot these magnificent creatures around the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge or keep an ear out for their haunting songs at night. Unfortunately, red wolves look very similar to nuisance canine. They're often mistakenly shot as coyotes or coy wolves, which are the hybrid between a coyote and a wolf. When you look at these pictures, it's extremely hard to tell the difference. You would have to see the size, and unfortunately, a juvenile red wolf looks very much like a coyote. Yes, there are alligators in the Outer Banks. In North Carolina, males can reach up to 13 feet and weigh up to 500 pounds or more. Females generally grow less than 9 feet and weigh up to 200 pounds. Adults range in color from black or dark gray to dark olive. Juveniles are born with a bright yellowish bands that encircle their bodies. They are seen in the ocean occasionally and on the roadways when it's getting colder. My mother used to have them come up onto her dock to sun, and that was in Knott's Island. There are hundreds of different species of birds that either migrate or inhabit year-round the coastal waters of the Outer Banks. But there are two important birds that are endangered. The smallest of the American terns, called the least tern, is actually an endangered species, and it nests on sandy beaches along the coastline and in many developed and heavily recreational areas. The little gray bird can be spotted with black tip yellow beak and a white eye strip during breeding season. For the rest of the year, it has a black eye strip and a black bill. And then piping plovers. Piping plovers are also considered to be endangered or threatened because their habitats coincide with heavy traffic areas on sandy beaches. These birds are another protected species on the Outer Bank. They run in short spurts and can be distinguished by their small size, pale tan backs, white underbellies, and one band around their chest, usually black or brown in color. They used to be very common when I was a kid. Reptiles are a significant component of the native biodiversity in virtually every natural, terrestrial, and freshwater habitat in the United States. Despite being often overlooked, they're vital components of the southeastern ecosystems. They can serve as important roles as predators and prey, and they form a lot of trophic links in a lot of ecosystems. They're also good indicators of environmental integrity. Up to 60 species of reptiles could possibly occur on the Outer Banks. According to investigations of reptile occurrences in the Outer Banks, 59 species of reptiles have been documented in Dare County and in North Carolina. Of these, 32 species of reptiles have been documented at Cape Hatteras National Seashore. The Outer Banks king snake is found only in North Carolina from Cape Hatteras to Cape Lookout, and it is now considered to be endangered. And it is a subspecies of the king snake. Generally, king snakes are dark and have a light colored band. The Outer Banks king snake has evolved to have a more grayish, and it can hide easier in the sands. One of the organisms that is most closely tied to sandy coastal ecosystems are the sea turtles. There are 5 species of sea turtles found along the Cape Hatteras National Seashore: the leatherback, the hawksbill, Kemp's ridley, loggerhead, and green. While all 5 of these sea turtle species can be found in seashore waters throughout the year, it's the female loggerhead and green turtles, and occasionally leatherback and Kemp's ridley turtles, that nest on these beaches. They're considered to be the extreme northern limits of their nesting ground. Hawksbills were documented nesting on Cape Hatteras for the first time in 2015, with 2 nests laid by a single female. Although sea turtles live most of their lives in the ocean, adult females will return to land to lay their eggs. They often migrate long distances between foraging ground and nesting beaches. Loggerheads nest once every 2 to 3 years and will lay an average of 4 clutches per year. The greatest threat to sea turtle survival is human activity, including the loss of nesting habitat due to coastal development, drowning in fishing gear, being hit by boats, disturbance of nesting beaches, development, beach lighting, seawalls, jetties, items left on the beach overnight, and nighttime activity on the beach, pollution and non-degradable debris in the ocean, and the harvesting of eggs and adult for food and commercial goods. In 1982, Congress passed the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, and it designates 186 barrier island units extending for 751 miles along the Atlantic and Gulf shoreline as coastal barrier resource systems. The law encourages the conservation of hurricane-prone, biologically rich coastal barriers by restricting federal expenditures that encourage development, such as federal flood insurance. Areas within the CBRS can be developed, however, pause. 1, 2, 3. In 1982, Congress passed the Coastal Barrier Resource Act, which designates 186 barrier island units extending for 751 miles along the Atlantic and the Gulf shoreline as coastal barrier resource systems. The law encourages the conservation of hurricane-prone, biologically rich coastal barriers by restricting federal aid that encourages development, such as federal flood insurance. Areas within the CBRS can be developed, however, it has to be private developers, and they cannot use any federal parties or money. Between 1982 and 2010, the CBRA has saved over $1 billion in federal dollars and will save millions more in the future. So all of the Outer Banks, all of the barrier islands of the Eastern Shore, and even parts of Sandbridge cannot get flood insurance, federal flood insurance through FEMA, and they also cannot get loans. So generally when a new house is built after 1982, they have to do it cash down. Before 1982, they're grandfathered in. In addition, 10 national seashores have been established along the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific coast. These national seashores are part of the national park system. Assateague Island in Virginia, Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, Cape Lookout in North Carolina. While Virginia Barrier Islands have several conservation and state parks, one right down the road from us at pause. One, two, three. In addition, 10 national seashores have been established along the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific coasts. These national seashores are part of the National Park System. Assateague Island in Virginia, Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, Cape Lookout in North Carolina are all national park systems. While Virginia Barrier Islands have several conservation and state parks, one right down the street from us at First Landing, and then down in South Sandbridge, we have Little Island and Back Bay Conservation. It is extremely hard to find North Carolina Barrier Island protected areas.